Hello, friends, and welcome to Out of Pocket. My name is Ryan, aka Ron, and today we have another tasty tier, or tiers. It's a tier list.
Tasty tears. Mmm.
I am planning to get a new microphone moving forward for my next videos, so I'm excited about that. It should sound a little bit better, but let's get into it. But first, actually, before I do, I know I do this sometimes, but I just wanted to say, I know it's a small milestone, but thank you for 50 subscribers. Whether you're here because you're my friend or my family, or whether you randomly stumbled across my channel, or maybe you're here because you just like my shorts. Or maybe, more than likely, you're here because I shared a card with you through Discord. Or maybe you're just here because of my Olipop shoutouts and my goal to try to get them to support me one day. Regardless, here's to you. Olipop, we're at 50. Alright, but first, before we jump into the actual tier list, you know what time it is. If you've watched mine before, it's time to name our tiers. So last time I did stage 1 tiers and I borrowed from the theater because it's the stage, you know. So this time we're going a little more specific. We're going to do some High School Musical. Alright, so this time to start it off, drum roll please for S tier. You should know what it is. It's Troy and Gabriella. What did you expect? Alright, moving on to A tier. Alright, this is where we could get a little contentious if you happen to be a High School Musical fan. So A tier is Ryan and Sharpay. Now, I know that I would say Sharpay is, listen, I'm no connoisseur, but I enjoyed High School Musical 2 especially, but I would say Sharpay is certainly more of a main character than Ryan. However, they kind of go together, they're brother and sister, so they're going to be here in the A tier. Next up, we have Chad and Taylor. Now, again, listen, I know Chad is probably more of a main character than Ryan. I think you could easily say he is, but I'm kind of going in pairs here, and so, you know, yeah, well, not the whole way down, but I wanted to include as many of the main characters as possible. So they're going to be here in the B tier, representing the B tier, if you will. It's the theater again. All right, moving on to C tier, we have Kelsey and her piano, because I don't recall if she has a boyfriend or something, or a partner. I think she does later in the movie, but anyway, she's really tied to her piano. She's not a main character, but yeah, she's, you know, she's a character, and she's fairly relevant, but not super relevant, so C tier. Alright, moving on to even more obscure things from High School Musical, and yes, I had to do some research for this one. We have Rocketman and his game winner. If you don't know what I'm talking about, watch the movies. It's kind of one of those, you know, D tier, it's like it's relevant for about 5 seconds and then it's not relevant anymore, so D tier. Alright, lastly, moving on to the F tier, because we skipped the E tier, we have Miley Cyrus. If you know, you know. Let's get into it. All right, starting off, we have Venusaur. So this is not the this is not the Mega EX Venusaur. This is the normal Venusaur. This was, I believe, from Genetic Apex. So these Pokemon were not very great. The math got better as they went on. So Venusaur is, unsurprisingly, going to the Miley Cyrus tier. So sorry, Venusaur. All right, I just had to mix up the tier list a little bit. I had it in not the order I wanted. So anyway, moving on to Gengar EX. We have a, you know, pretty decent Pokemon. I'm putting it in C tier, Kelsey and her piano. So it's a decent Pokemon. I've tried to make it work. I ultimately don't think that stopping supporter cards is good enough, especially when you only do 100 damage and it costs 3 energy to get there, but I wish it was better. It's not bad, but C tier I think is fair. Kelsey and her piano. Alright, moving on, we have Stokesard, and I'm going to put Stokesard right ahead of Gengar. Stokesard is very good in niche metas and with Rare Candy. It was not good to my understanding before Rare Candy, and I believe that. And it's really not good now that Megas have come out. It's not super relevant. The 150 just isn't enough, and it's too slow, but it's not bad, you know? It has its time, and maybe it'll have time again, but I kind of doubt it. So the game just moves on, you know, it keeps going. All right, next up we have Lunala, which, as I have said, is the Forgotten Sun and Moon Pokemon, but I'm going to put it in the Chad and Taylor, the B tier. I think Lunala is good, it's just not great, but mathematically I think it's pretty good. You could even maybe argue it's higher, probably not, but it's certainly not bad at all. For those who don't know, you can, once during your turn, move psychic energy from one of your bench Pokemon to your active Pokemon, so it creates some unique plays where you can kind of shift energy around, but ultimately just probably doesn't do enough damage and it's not relevant enough, but maybe one day. All right, I've organized it by type, so we're just gonna do that. I also should say, I usually do say that, what's the criteria for this tier list? Well, if you watch my last video on math, it's basically math. So I'm evaluating all of these Pokemon in a vacuum, independent of all other synergistic or deck factors. So I'm not counting, you know, how relevant they are with Cyrus, or how relevant they are with E-Switch, or how relevant they are with Rare Candy. I'm evaluating them wholly on their own merit, independent of anything else. Just math. So moving on, we have Decidueye, which I'm going to put here above Lunala in the B tier. That's right, the B tier. Now, you could say, really, Decidueye, it should be at least A tier. And if we were evaluating Decidueye either in the current meta or the previous metas, or in regards to including its pre-evolutions, yes, I would put it probably in the A tier. But because I'm evaluating Decidueye only on its own merit, as I just said, and not counting anything else, including its pre-evolutions, though you could argue that, but I'm not right here. I'm just putting it by itself. I think it belongs in the B tier. All right, next up, I'm going to try to make it a little more accessible. Put the image here on the right so you can see it. I should have done this with the previous, probably the other tier lists, just to help for those, especially if you don't know the game as well. A little more work on my end, but that's okay. So next up we have Beedrill. So Beedrill does 80 damage and you can discard a random energy from your opponent's active. I think Beedrill belongs in the B tier, and I'm going to put it beside Lunala and Decidueye. It's a Pokemon that was one of my favorites, if not my very favorite, for several months when I started playing the game. I think it's good, it's just not quite good enough. But it is pretty decent, so B tier it goes. Very briefly, here's Venusaur that I put in the Miley Cyrus F tier. It does 60 Razor Leaf and for 3 energy, and 100 for 100 damage for 4 energy. Does 100 damage and heals itself 30. It's just too slow. Basically, it's too slow. It's not good enough. So there's Venusaur. Again, this is really just if you don't know the game that well. So, which I know there are at least a few of you out there who watch, or at least sometimes who could watch, who don't. So anyway, Stokesard is where I put here in the C tier. The Stoke ability, you can take 3 energy from your energy zone and attach to this Pokemon, and then you have 4 after that. So basically this Pokemon wants to get in the active spot and then use Stoke, and then next turn it's just hitting for 150 over and over again, which used to be really good, but now it's not that good. All right, Gengar, its ability basically says is as long as it's in the active spot, it's in the C tier here. As long as it's in the active spot, it prevents your opponent from using supporter cards, which is very relevant, but it's just not quite good enough because it only does 100 damage, and once they kill it, they get 2 points and they can use supporters again. So it's just not quite good enough. All right, then of course we have Lunala. I talked about this briefly, but Lunala says once during your turn you may move all psychic energy from one of your bench Pokemon to your active Pokemon. So it's good, it's just not great. And finally Decidueye, and we're all caught up, which is it's a relevant Pokemon in the meta right now if you don't know, but it has 170 HP. Razor Leaf for 2 energy does 80, but Pierce the Pain is really where it shines. It's 2 colorless energy, and it says this attack does 100 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon that has damage on it. In other words, if none of them have damage, you can't use this. You can only use Razor Leaf. But once a Pokemon has damage on it, which its pre-evolutions let you damage any Pokemon on the board, you can now just snipe anything, whether it's in the active spot or the bench spot. So there's Decidueye. All right, moving on to everything else. All right, next up we have Jumpluff, and I'm gonna put it, that's right, ahead of Decidueye with my little grass clan here. So Jumpluff says it does 70 damage, 160 HP. It says you may switch this Pokemon with one of your bench Pokemon. So basically it just combos extremely well with things like Oricorio or other such things. I have a deck gameplay on my channel with Oricorio with Jumpluff if you want to check that out. But Jumpluff, I think mathematically, yes, sometimes it's irrelevant, but sometimes it's very relevant. So yeah, I think it's a good, solid B tier Pokemon. Lollipop break. All right, next up we have Infernape, which says 170 HP, 140 attack, no retreat, 2 costs for Flare Blitz. Discard all fire energy from this Pokemon. I think Infernape is A tier. Ryan and Sharpay get their first Pokemon. I think it is very good. It is just simply overshadowed by Blaziken, as I said on my math video last week. and so therefore it's not seeing play. But especially with Flame Patch, it's really good. The fact that it does 140 is very relevant. The fact that it can free retreat is very relevant. So I think Infernape is an A tier Pokemon. Our next up, Incineroar, made it a little bigger so we can read it. It says 180 HP, has an attack for 1 cost called Fire Fang. It does 30 damage. It says your opponent's active Pokemon is now burned. And then it has an attack for 3 cost, 2 fire, 1 colorless, and it starts at 80 damage. But if your opponent's, if this Pokemon, if Incineroar has damage on it, the attack does 60 more damage, which is 140. So it's pretty solid. It has good flexibility with the 1 cost, and it has decent flexibility and pretty high upside with its 3 cost attack. So Incineroar is really not bad. I am going to put it in the B tier here, right behind the Decidueye and in front of Beedrill. I debated this section a little bit, but I think this is a good spot for it. It's not in the meta, but it's a good Pokemon, and it's something you could, come back to if you really wanted to. So B tier, Chad and Taylor. There you go. All right, next up we got the OG Charizard. It has 180 HP, a 3 cost slash attack that does 60 damage, which is not good like Venusaur's, and then a 4 cost Crimson Storm, which does 200, which is still fairly relevant, but you discard 2 energy from this Pokemon, going back to 2. So it couples well with Flame Patch, of course, or E-Switch or whatever, but it's just still a bit too slow. Even you could use it in this meta with the new Charmeleon and stuff, but it's still probably just not quite good enough, especially because that 200 is not always KOing the Mega Pokemon. So I think it's really not bad in this meta, but again, I'm evaluating independent of all things, including Flame Patch and such, and so because of that, Charizard is going to hang out at the top of our D tier, Rocket Man and his game winner. So there we go. D tier is just not quite good enough, but it does have some support that makes it higher if you factor that in. Our next up we have Solgaleo, 180 HP, 120 attack. It does 10 damage to itself for 2 energy, and ultimately it's good. Spoiler, because of its ability, which says once during your turn, if this Pokemon is on your bench, you may switch it with your active Pokemon. I broke this down in my math video, but I think that currently Solgaleo is the second best mathematical EX Pokemon in the game. It's very good. It was pretty relevant for several sets in the meta. It's not relevant now, but it's kind of one of those Pokemon, if they give Metal some good support, it could be relevant again. 120 is decent. It's not great damage, but it's pretty good. 180 HP is tanky, and its ability is just really strong. So I think it belongs, spoiler, at number 2 in the tier list. All right, next up we got Tinkaton EX, the other Metal 2 Stage 2 EX Pokemon, 170 HP. Terrific Thumping does 80 damage base for 3 energy, but you flip a coin, and if heads, this attack can do up to 160. So coin flipping, I hate coin flipping, but it doesn't really matter what I want in this tier list. We're just doing the math. However, mathematically it's still bad, so it's gonna go to Rocket Man and his game winner, below Charizard OG. And yeah, it's just not relevant. So they need to give Metal some more support. Moving on, we have Dragonite. Now again, this is where I need to emphasize, this is just in its own merit. I am not counting Lyra. I am not counting it with baby Pokemon. I am just mathematically evaluating Dragonite for its own merit. So 180 HP, it is a dragon type, 180 attack, which kills a lot of things, but not everything now that we have megas. It's a 3 cost attack, but it has 2 different energy types, water and lightning, and it says during your next turn this Pokemon cannot attack. So basically it is a finisher, or you have to have something like Lyra, so or some kind of retreat thing that makes it easy, which I think is just Lyra, and not Ilima, because that's just colorless. But anyway, Dragonite in its own merits, I am putting in the Miley Cyrus tier, the F tier, and I debated and am still debating putting this below Venusaur, but I think it's good enough as a finisher that you could put it above Venusaur, because Venusaur is just too slow. But it's in by itself, it is not good. It's just not good. As none of the dragon types, I would say in their own merit, are good. Even the Altaria It's decent because of baby Pokemon and other things, but if you're just relying on running dual energy for all these, they're just not good in general. All right, Garchomp. I really like Garchomp. I tried to make it work with Chingling. I did do a deck play, a gameplay on that if you want to check it out in the channel under Dangerous Disruption playlists or just on the channel. But Garchomp, 170 HP, has a 1-cost attack called Linear Attack that does 50 damage to, excuse me, to any of your opponent's Pokemon. And then Dragon Claw for 3 energy does 100 damage. So Garchomp is good, it's just not quite good enough. If its Linear Attack, I said this before, did 60 damage, that would be very relevant. Or if Dragon Claw did like 110 or 120 or something, then it would be a pretty relevant Pokemon. It's just not quite good enough. But if you looked at my math video, it is right at the average. It is the average mathematically in terms of how I do the math of all the stage 2 EX Pokemon. And so it is going to go top of C tier. You could certainly put it, you know, bottom of B tier or something like that. But I think top of C is fair. It's not seeing any play, and it probably won't maybe ever again, to be honest, but it's not bad at all. If they ever buff things, like if you could do Linear Attack for, you know, 60 or 70 consistently somehow, then like by attaching a tool or something, then maybe that would make it relevant. But I don't think it's going to see play either for a while or ever, but it's not bad. Kelsey and her piano. All right, so moving on, we got Gallade. Gallade is 170 HP fighting Pokemon. Its Energized Blade attack starts at 70 damage for 2 cost. And it says this attack does 20 more damage for each energy attached to your opponent's active Pokemon. Now, when I mathematically evaluate Gallade, I make the assumption that the average will be that they will have 2 energy on their opponent's active, meaning it will do on average 110 damage to the opponent's active for 2 energy. And in light of that, I think Gallade is solid. And so I have Gallade at the top of the B tier. I think it is a relevant, it's not relevant in the current meta, but I think it is good. It could always be relevant in a high cost meta, which we're not really in ever, it seems like. But if ever there were again, like the Darktina meta, Gallade is relevant and good, and I could see it seeing play again potentially. Kind of like Alolan Raichu or Indeedee's attack or things of that nature, or Tapu Lele. Pokemon I like, and so I think it is a solid B tier choice. Being a little picky on the S and A tier this video. All right, moving on, we have Machamp EX, 180 HP, 120 attack, 3 retreat, 3 cost, Mega Punch. Pretty simple, and it's pretty bad. So we're gonna put it right here below Charizard, above Tinkaton, and the Rocket Man and his game-winning D tier. So yeah, it's super simple, not that good. Solid D tier. All right, next up we have Poliwrath EX, which is a somewhat more recent EX, but it is unfortunately not a good EX. It's 180 HP, 100 attack initially for 3 cost, 1 fighting required, but if this Pokemon has a water energy attached, this attack does 40 more damage, bringing it up to 140. Now, you can make this Pokemon somewhat relevant with Mantike, maybe Manaphy or something like that, or Jellicent perhaps, but in its own right, it's bad. It's really, really bad. They did not make Poliwrath good at all. For some reason, would have been nice if it was decent, but they decided, nope, we don't want Poliwrath to be good. So Poliwrath is going to round out our Miley Cyrus F tier. It's just not good. Like, you can make it okay with some synergistic stuff, but at best you can make it okay with, you know, really building around it. So it's just not that good. Plain and simple. All right, we're getting into water. You know what that means. We might have some good ones, but we'll see. All right, starting with Kingdra, 170 HP, 90 attack, 1 retreat, 2 cost. Stormy Prison says during your opponent's next turn, the defending Pokemon cannot retreat. Now, of the Pokemon that say defending Pokemon cannot retreat, I think this is easily the best one, but it's still not quite, it's just, the effect is just not quite good enough. I'll plan to talk about it a little more in the future, but it's just not quite what you're looking for. However, because Kingdra does decent damage and has pretty good HP, I would say it's the only Pokemon that has this effect that you actually don't mind having it lock your opponent's Pokemon in. So with all that said, we are going to put it at the bottom of the B tier next to Lunala in the Chad and Taylor tier. I think it is deserving of B tier. I think it's better than C, but it's definitely not A. So There you go. All right, next up we have Greninja EX, 170 HP, 100 attack for 2 energy, which is pretty good. 2 retreat, but it's not relevant because Shifting Stream says once during your turn you may switch your active water Pokemon with one of your bench Pokemon. So naturally this Pokemon sucks, right? Because they hate Greninja. So no, this is you probably know where this is going. This is the Troy and Gabriella tier, and it is in fact the only Troy and Gabriella S tier because I think it is clearly mathematically and synergy wise, I'm not counting synergy in this video, but I'm just doing math. On the math alone, I think it's clearly S tier, and if you add in synergy, it's just, I think, far and away the best stage 2 EX Pokemon currently in the game. So there's Greninja. All right, moving on to Blastoise, which came out, I also believe, in Genetic Apex, so we're going the wrong direction here, but 180 HP, it has a 2-cost Surf that does 40 damage, and a 3-cost Hydro Bazooka that does 100. However, if you happen to get 5 energy on it, it does 160 for Hydro Bazooka, and it has 3 retreat. So, long story short, it's not good. It came out at the beginning of the game. The math was probably decent at first, but now it's not good at all. So Blastoise is going to the bottom of our Rocket Man D tier, and I think that is pretty fair. So, I mean, 100 HP, 80 HP is decent, but ultimately if you look at, you know, Blastoise or this OG Charizard or the Venusaur, their first attack is notably not good enough. And their second attack's not really either, but I think especially their first attacks are just not good. So they're too expensive, they're not enough damage. So D tier for our friend Blastoise. All right, now we got Primarina. So last water, we're going the other direction. Primarina is not bad. We have 180 HP. Its first attack, Hydro Pump, does 40 damage. However, if you put an extra water energy, so you have 2 water energy, now it does 80 damage. And then its last attack, Sparkling Aria, does 100 damage and heals 20 from the Pokemon for 3 cost water. So Primarina is a good Pokemon. It has I really like the flexibility of Primarina. It can attack for 1, 2, and 3 energy and different damages, which makes it very solid, I think. And it can do 100 and heal. If you build, probably the main way to build Primarina is a real tanky build, and so if you do that, it's not bad, but it's just not enough as the game progresses, and now they have Mega Pokemon. So I'm gonna put Primarina in the B tier behind Jumpluff in front of Decidueye. Now again, I would put Decidueye in front of Primarina with current synergy and such, but just evaluating them mathematically by themselves, I think this is a pretty fair placement for it. Close to the top of B tier. So there you go, Primarina. Well, let me shrink it because you can't see Kingdra anymore. See, this is why I didn't do the images before, all the logistics. Blah. Anyway, Primarina, solid B tier choice. Good Pokemon. Moving on, we have Pidgeot EX, which says 170 HP, colorless, 80 attack for 3 costs, which is really bad, but it does 20 more damage for each of your opponent's benched Pokemon. So it's got a bad Suicune effect, and it's a stage 2, and it costs 3, and it's colorless. So long story short, it's not good. We are going to put it close to the bottom of our D tier, but above Blastoise and Rocket Man in his game winner. It's just not good. If it was like plus 20 for each of your opponent's benched and your bench, like Suicune, it would be a lot higher, but it's not. So D tier. It's a solid, not solid D tier. All right, last but most certainly not least, we have Crobat EX, which is 170 HP, 70 attack, which is low, but for 1 energy, and it poisons the opponent's active Pokemon. So basically it's doing 80 damage presumably on your turn and then 10 on their turn. So mathematically I call that 90. If you add in Nihilego, which is not part of this calculation, obviously it gets much better. I think Crobat's still relevant. It's in the meta a little bit, not super, but it's a very, very solid Pokemon. It was very annoying when it first came out. I would like to make a deck with it one day if they give me a good disruptor to pair it with, but I don't feel like I have that quite yet. But Crobat is gonna go in 3rd place up here between Solgaleo and Infernape. Yeah, I think that's a good spot for it. I think it will remain relevant, especially if they give it really good pairings. Yeah, so there you go. There's your tier list. All right, hopping back out. Thanks for watching. Ideally, those visuals were helpful. I should have done those on previous tier lists. I'll plan to do them moving forward. It's not that much extra work, and I think it's ultimately helpful. So let me know what you think. Again, thanks for 50 subscribers. I know it's not a big milestone, but I'm going to try to grow the channel. I don't really have like, you know, grandiose goals for this channel. I wouldn't mind it, you know, contributing a little income one day to my family, but ultimately this is fun for me and I enjoy doing it. So appreciate you watching. Have a good day or a good evening or a good morning. See ya.